If you're curious what is triggering your migraine attacks and you think that maybe it's something in your environment like the weather, this is the video for you. I'm breaking down different categories of migraine triggers and giving you more examples of what that might look like, how to know if this is something that's impacting you, and ways to prevent running into these triggers or having to be so reactive to them. If you're new here, my name's Casey. I'm chatting about all things living with migraine, from my prevention strategies, my own personal experiences, different relief things that have worked for me, and sharing those insights with you. And if you have a migraine-y brain and you want some connection, support, and inspiration, make sure you hit the subscribe button. So we are chatting about environmental triggers. This is one of the 4 types that I have categorized of the different types of migraine triggers. Now, like I've talked about before and we'll continue talking about all the time, our migraine brains hate change. So the changes is what's really hitting us and causing the attacks. When we think about our environment, this can be things like immediately around us, like bright lights, flashing lights, fluorescent lights, stuff like that, or really strong sounds, loud sounds, or something that's very high pitched and irritating, that can potentially be one of your triggers, or very strong smells, which this one's a really big one for me personally. I don't do well with strong smells. I'm very scent sensitive, so very chemically things, smoky things. Ugh, it's a rough time for me. And then of course, when we think about environment, the other environmental type of trigger is the weather. So this one can impact us if it's a change in weather patterns, right? It's the changes. So if it's a cold front, a warm front, a barometric pressure change, a storm coming in, humidity changes, or even environmental things like pollen or something like that, the outdoor environment can potentially be triggering our migraine brains as well. So how do you know if this is one that you're facing? Of course, I would recommend kind of reflecting, and it'd be even better if you were tracking. So if you were tracking your migraine patterns and symptoms and potential triggers, you might catch on to this. And if you haven't been on the lookout for these types of triggers and you are tracking, I recommend thinking about them each time. And overall, I recommend when you're tracking to write down all potential triggers so you can kind of pick up on different trends. So if you don't have that information available to you, if you're able to just think about what types of things seem very irritating to your migraine brain, I know I'm very scent sensitive and I'm also triggered by strong smells, so maybe trying to make some of those connections, just reflecting. Also, you can kind of watch weather patterns, and there's even great apps to show pressure changes, and you're able to kind of monitor that situation. Now, unfortunately, it is hard to avoid this trigger because our environment is often very much outside of our control. If we're thinking about an environment inside of our control, there are definitely things you can do to make it more migraine friendly, like using different types of lights, different types of scents, or maybe going scent free, things like that. There are things you can do if you're able to control your environment, but ultimately a lot of this is kind of out of our control. Oh, and by the way, I want to make sure I share this because I chatted a little bit about my experience, and strong smells are a big no for me. Something I really like is using peppermint essential oil and just keeping that in a small container on the go. And if I'm feeling there's a lot of scents happening around me, it's easy to drown them out with just putting some peppermint oil under my nose. That's one of my hacks that I really like. So there, like I said, are things that you can do to control your immediate environment to kind of avoid some of these environmental triggers, but unfortunately sometimes this is out of our control. So what I would recommend is doing what you can to control these ones if they are ones that impact you, and maybe consider focusing on other prevention strategies to really boost your resistance to these types of triggers. But yeah, that's going to be it for me right now. I do have 3 more videos to share with you, categories of possible migraine trigger types. So definitely stay tuned and hit the subscribe button and the like button if you want to see more and you want to get more insights about possible trigger types. And let me know in the comments if you think that environmental triggers are something that is impacting you personally, and if you have any strategies around them. All right, toodles.